To visualize the relationship between the inputs and outputs, we can use response surfaces. And to do that, I will click on the project tab, and I will go under data exploration and drag response surface in. It says create standalone system, and it will tag on to that parameter set. And if I go to the design of experiments, if I double click on that, that opens up a new tab. And if I say preview, by the way, be very hesitant to click update because it can wait for a long time. So if I say preview, and if I then select the input parameter, it shows me, okay, these are all the values of the input parameters I'm going to try. And these are not the this is not the range I'm interested in. So I'll go back here and say, I want to explore between 0.2 and 0.32. And it says, oh, it'll clear this data. You'll see that go away. I'll say yes. And then the upper bound, I want to make it 0.32. And now if I say preview, okay, so that's my lower bound, that's my upper bound, which I've already examined, and then it's put in, points in between, and they're equally spaced. Now, design of experiments is a scientific way to select sampling points, and this becomes more and more challenging as you have more input parameters, which students love to do. I'm more careful. I do it one or two input parameters. And you can ask the internet about design of experiments and answers how it creates those sampling points. Okay, now, and you see it says design point, 0.2 and 0.32 are design points because I already had them over here. And then I will now click update, and that'll take a while because it has to do the FEA solution for the ones it hasn't already done. So I'll say update. And it says updating design of experiments. As you're doing this, it might be good to just close space claim. It might be quicker, otherwise it brings it up every time. And you see that, it's updated all the design points. It takes a few minutes. And so now I can examine this relationship using the response surface. So I'll go back to the project page, and I will double click on that, and that opens the response surface in a new tab. And if I go to the, if I say update here, it'll do that. It'll show me the relationship visually. And once once it's done, if you highlight response, it'll show you the relationship, and I'll go here and I'll say show design points. And by the way, if these windows get messed up, you can usually say tools, options, I guess it's view, reset workspace, or reset window layout. And you can do this in mechanical too. I've seen that being a problem for students. I thought I'll mention it. So we actually have 5 samples here from the design of experiments, and then it's interpolated and created the response surface. And that shows me the relationship between the inner radius and tau max. I can also look at the relationship between the inner radius and tau min. And this makes sense because as I increase the inner radius, the thickness gets smaller, the polar moment of inertia gets smaller, and so I expect the shear stress to get higher. So the trend is right. Now, if I want to visualize both, I have to export the data. So what I did was I right-clicked and said export chart data as CSV, and then I copied, both curves into an Excel workbook. So I was able to get 3 columns, inner radius, tau min, tau max, and then plot it. And that's a kind of plot you're looking for. And now if I look at this relationship, I say, hey, I don't want my maximum stress. So let's say I'll go back to the maximum over here, and I'd say, hey, I don't want it to be greater than something like 46, let's say, megapascals, which means I don't, I want to ignore this point, but that point looks really interesting. And that's inner radius is 0.29. As you highlighted, it will show you the value. And so what I will do is I want to examine that more. So I'll go back here and I'll say, right-click and say, insert as design point. I want to examine that further, and it highlights it. And now if I go to the parameter set, see, it's added it over here as another input that, another design point that you would like to examine more closely, and you want to ignore the others. And then you would have to do update design point and so on. So that gives you a quick way to visualize the relationship between inputs and outputs.